And now comes the mute piece. If I can remember how to do this, I do, which is here. And I will have Daryn off of mute. Perfect. You can still hear okay, Daryn, and we can hear you, I'm sure. Great. So we've got a good crowd of people here. We're excited. So I want to welcome everyone to Fireside for 26th of September. And we're excited to have Daryn Watson, our own, from Fireside Adoptees, talking about his personal story as an adopted person. And so Daryn and I have gotten together and done a little bit of prep here in terms of questions and things that seem to be tailored to keep things on track in terms of relevance for his story. And again, perfectly willing and wanting to hear your questions as well. So we'll start, Daryn, with, could you tell us where you were born, when, and the conditions about how old you were when you were relinquished?
Okay. I was born in a small farming town in Alberta, Canada, called Hanna. Hanna is known for three main things. It's the Canadian geese capital of Canada. Lanny McDonald, the NHL Hall of Fame hockey player, is there, and also Nickelback. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but they're also from Hanna. I was born July 9th, 1970. And the reason I was relinquished at birth, my birth mother never held me. She was put under before the procedure, before I was born, which was very common back then. I was basically relinquished because of her father was not a very good person, and it would have been an abusive environment for me to be raised in. Yeah. And I was adopted at 7 months of age.
Were you in foster care up to that point then, Daryn?
Yeah, I was in foster care with a local family. And my adopted parents lived in a town called Peace River. They were in northern Alberta, which was 300 miles north of Edmonton. And they called my mother on February 12th, which was a Thursday, and they said, well, we have a boy for you to pick up tomorrow. And she owned a flower shop. So being Valentine's weekend, she couldn't drop everything and pick me up the next day. So they held me at another foster care for the weekend until that Monday. Then my parents came and picked me up in Edmonton.
And what age did you discover that you were adopted, or were you told, or how did that come about?
I remember being around 3 years old, and I would ask my parents to tell me the story, how they got me. And my dad used to joke that they got me in the strawberry patch at Safeway. They did get me at an office building beside a mall in Edmonton, so it wasn't too far from the truth. But I was about 3 years old, and I remember them telling me the story, how they got me.
And did you grow up with siblings in your adopted family?
My parents had a daughter themselves. She was about 7.5 months older than me, so she and I were the only siblings that we had, and both my parents were single children as well.
And how about in terms of your adoptive family helping you to understand yourself as an adopted person? Did they help you to adjust psychologically? I know you were young when you found out, but throughout your life, did you feel like you got some support in terms of coming to understand yourself?
Early on, when I had some questions. So when I was 6, my parents took me to the town I was born, and I saw the hospital where I was born, and I saw a parking spot with the doctor's name on the one that delivered me. And then we went to a local department store, and I bought a little black and white panda teddy bear as a souvenir. After that, I didn't really have any questions for for a long time, and we didn't really talk about it after that.
It wasn't talked about. Was it discouraged to talk about, or was it just something that in your mind you didn't feel the need to bring up very much early on?
I didn't feel the need to bring it up very much. When I was 19, my parents moved to Texas, and my mom said, if you want to search for your birth mother, we can help you with that. And at the time, I wasn't ready, and we were in Edmonton by then, Edmonton, Alberta, and so I didn't really think about it that much for a few years after.
And your experience as an adopted child, school, friends, family interactions, how was that for you? I know it's a big category, but maybe a sense of how that went for you.
In a lot of ways, I felt insecure. I didn't feel worthy enough to be around the in crowd. And I was very competitive with sports, so I thought I could fit in that way. With family, we didn't have any first cousins, but my grandparents on my mom's side, they adored me, and my paternal grandpa, he wasn't too keen on the adoption route initially. So I didn't get along with my paternal grandparents as much as my maternal in my adopted family. And my sister and I tried to get along, and we were kind of expected to get along, but a lot of times we didn't get along. So that was kind of a challenge growing up in a family with having a sibling that was not adopted and biological to my parents.
Sometimes people talk about biological favoritism with siblings that are not adopted. Did you see any of that growing up? Do you feel that they had a preference for her as their biological child?
I think they tried to treat us equally as much as they could. I know I've read a lot of stories where that's not very common. It is common for adoptees to be treated differently from children who were not adopted in the family. And so my parents tried their best to treat us equally as much as they could.
Was there anything in particular that you found was especially challenging to be an adopted person while you were growing up?
I think just feeling self-confidence in myself besides playing sports.
Yeah.
I would, when I became in junior high and high school, I dated a lot, and I thought I would fit in more with people if I had a girlfriend, and in a false sense, I felt secure in that way, but I was never able to sustain a long-term relationship for a long time in high school and then beyond. So that was a challenge for me.
Sure, understandable for certain. And I believe you said at 19 was the time when they mentioned they would support you finding or looking into your family?
Yeah, when
Your birth family?
here to Texas, and then I came down that December and I loved it, and within a year later I moved in mid-September 1991 to Texas.
So adopted people have different reasons for trying to find out about their bio families. Some of them are looking for relationships, some of them are looking for information or a combination of those. What would you say was foremost in your mind in terms of why you wanted to seek your bio family?
I wanted answers, what happened, why I was adopted. And growing up, I would see talk shows that had reunions with mothers and adoptees.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have that same experience that they showed on TV. I wanted to be able to meet and hug my birth mother and
Yeah.
and feel that embrace and get to know her. I also always wanted to have a brother, and I ended up with several brothers on between both maternal and paternal families as well.
In terms of when you started to seek or look, in conversations with you, you mentioned some events that led up to your quest or to your journey of finding. Could you talk a little bit about that? I know it didn't happen at age 19, right? It happened a little later than that.
Yeah. When I was 23, I went to a regression therapist, and that particular session, I went back to when I was conceived, to when I was born, and then taken to foster care, and I could experience everything that happened to me emotionally back then. And it was a very powerful session. And that session, I would later learn, was actually on my birth mother's 40th birthday, which I didn't know at the time. And then when I turned 24, a few weeks later, my mom gave me a copy of Journey of the Adopted Self by Betty Jean Lifton. And I looked at the inside cover my mom wrote in the book, and supporting me in my journey. And so I didn't feel comfortable reading the book. So I put it aside for a whole year. And once I turned 25, I started to read the book. And I was very hooked on reading the book, and I could relate to most of the things that Betty Jean Lifton wrote. And then I decided that I needed to start my search. Luckily, that spring in Alberta, they opened records for people born between 1966 and 1985, and I fell into that category. So I wrote to the government and to get my identifying information.
That's fortunate. I was part of a closed adoption in California, so I never had the opportunity to find out except through a private investigator at the time. But that's fortunate that lined up for you to be able to do that. Because I've been interested in what the status of records were for adoptees in Canada. So that's helpful that you've mentioned that. So you found out, were you primarily, so I think for me, I was interested in finding my mother more than my father, but I think that's something psychological with me. She seemed like such a presence to me emotionally. But did you find that it was more important to you to find out more about one side of the family versus the other?
Yeah, for me, it was my goal and hope was to find my birth mother. And I got my identifying information on October 2nd. I went to a local search meeting with Adoption Knowledge affiliates, and I opened my records there, got my birth name, and a woman who was a search angel, she offered to put it on the internet on some search websites. And I agreed to it. I didn't think it would really help, but I didn't understand the internet very well. And also that weekend, I did call information to get phone numbers in the town I was born in, Hannah, and I found 3 numbers, and I was just too terrified to call. And I journaled and prayed about it, and the message was to wait. And I didn't know how long that would be, but I said, okay, God, that's what's going to happen. I'll wait. And then I got a call the next day from one of the AKA members, and they said that a search angel in Canada found my birth mother and left a message. And the day after that was Monday, Thanksgiving Day in Canada on October 9th. And I talked to the search angel that evening, and he said, well, I left her a message, but don't get your hopes up. She may not call you. And so I was really kind of on pins and needles as what to do. And so that night she did call at 9 o'clock my time, and we talked for about an hour and a half. And it was just quite an amazing call, and it was very emotional, and so was she. So
yeah, completely relate to that. I had something very similar for myself in my first
Mhm.
my birth mother through the phone, and that's probably the bravest thing I ever did was calling her out of the blue, because they did give me a phone number for her when they gave me my information for her.
Okay.
And I sat on it for a few days because I thought, what do I do? What do I do? And the agency, the private investigator was saying, don't do anything, don't do anything. And I said, I'm going to do it. And I did. And thankfully it turned out okay. But yeah, I understand entirely the risks, the protocol or formality that people who are searching want to follow, but the excitement of, I just need to get something over with and really try to see what's going to happen. And for me, it was a
Yeah.
precipitating event. So it sounds like for you that you were able to do it a little more cautiously, but still just as circumspectly of really wanting it to go well. And I'm glad that the conversation went that well for you at first. I know the emotions associated with that were overwhelming. I was at work when it happened. I went,
Oh, wow.
I called her from work. It was after hours. I came back and was talking to my friend. I said, I just called my mother. He said, how is she? I said, no, you don't understand. I just called my mother. I've never talked to her before. So he got chills. And yeah, the reason I'm bringing this up is the immediate desire to share this with other people. Did you feel like you wanted to go tell people? I know that your adoptive family wouldn't have known at this point that you had found her. Or how was the experience of talking to your family after finding and making contact?
Um, right after the call, my roommate came home during the call, and she was friends with my mom, my adopted mom, and I said, well, I just got off the phone with my mom, and she said, oh, really? I said, no, this is my birth mother, and she's like, oh my God. So I called my parents, and my dad answered, and it was after 10:30 at night here, and so I told him what happened, and he was excited, and I felt just completely full and elated.
Yeah.
And then he said, I'll tell your mom in the morning, she's sleeping. And they were both very happy for me. And my mom's initial response when my dad told her was well, it's about time he found her. And even though my search was short, it was less than 2 months, it went very fast for me, because I know people look for years or decades, and sometimes they don't find anything. And I know that can imagine being very hard for people that search for that long.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely people in our own group who are seeking and trying to find those connections right now.
Yeah.
So can you describe how the reunion went when you actually met up with her? I guess the reunion starts psychologically when you make the contact, and then the presence of being with somebody. How was that for you? And how did that unfold as you went through the reunion?
We met in early October on the phone, and then we would send fax messages and letters and photos and stuff. And then I thought, well, it'd be really cool if I spent my first Christmas and New Year's with them. And I brought the idea to my birth mother, and she was open to it. And she talked to her husband and my brothers, and they agreed that would be okay. So leading up to that point, after we agreed I would fly up there for Christmas, I felt very numb. I kept thinking of just wanting that moment to meet her for the first time, and give her a hug, and just have contact in person. And so we met. It was I flew up to Calgary. It was December 21st, 1995, and I came through customs, and I saw her in the airport, and I told her to wait so I could take a picture of her before we embraced. I don't know why I wanted that, but she granted me that. And then we got dinner and went back we stayed in adjoining rooms at a hotel, and just to get to know each other that night. And we talked and looked at pictures, and it was really a good time for us to connect, because I didn't want others there to be a distraction or anything. I just want us to have that time together to get to know each other.
And as things progressed in the reunion, obviously, I relate entirely to a honeymoon type experience at the beginning of the reunion. I know for me, it didn't stay that way beyond a few months, and then it went like this and ended up kind of where it is right now, which is kind of shallow. But how did it unfold for you?
The time I did spend up there, there were some good things. I got to know my brothers a little bit, but there was also a lot of tension because of the connection I had with my birth mother, and her husband was understandably jealous. And the thing, even in reunions, even if because my siblings didn't know about me, but even if they do, you are a distraction to the family unit that's there. And it could be a wanted or unwanted distraction, but your presence kind of disrupts what's going on with their lives or what has been going on with their lives. After reunion, I flew back to Texas, and I was really, after a couple of days, I really fell into a depression for a while. I was still going to support group meetings, and I started going back to school, but I just could not stop thinking of, should I stay here in Texas or move back to Canada? I was really in a kind of a quandary about what to do with my life for a few months. And then I found a therapist to go to. He was not trained in adoption, but he was very good at focusing on releasing emotions and thoughts and stuff like that. So it was very helpful once I started working with him.
How long were you in reunion? Because I know things eventually didn't go the way everyone would hope they would, or at least that you would hope they would. But how long did the reunion last?
Officially about 20 years. There were times that we would take time out from each other, and then back in about 10 years ago or so, my mother and I had a falling out, and we didn't communicate. And then back in 2012, she messaged me on our reunion anniversary, and so we emailed a little bit. And at the time, my adoptive mom was sick with pancreatic cancer, and she was kind of going downhill. We weren't really, my family and I weren't really accepting of that. We were kind of in denial, but my birth mother and I talked near the end of October 2012. We talked for about an hour, and less than a week later, my mom died. And so my birth mother gave me some space, and that year I went up to Calgary for Christmas. My son and his family came down for the memorial in November for my mother, and my son's mother invited me to come up and have Christmas with them. And so I did, and then I saw my birth mother that January, early January. We had breakfast for a couple hours, and she had grown to not want to talk about the past. She had written me that she was over adoption. She didn't want to be identified as a birth mother anymore, things like that, which to me sounded really angry and underneath things that she hadn't dealt with. And I thought, well, that's kind of our connection, whether you like it or not, that's how we're related.
Yes, it's a forever connection.
Yeah. So we didn't really set any guidelines how we would stay in contact or anything after we had that meeting for breakfast. that April, she texted me on Easter Sunday and said, Happy Easter. So I replied back, Happy Easter to you too. Thank you very much. And so I'm thinking things are going fine. A couple weeks later, I came back from another tennis tournament and there was a package in the mail from her. And so I didn't open it till the next morning. It was a Monday, and she sent an angry letter to me that she had handwritten, which was not uncommon for her. But she also sent back pictures of me growing up that my mom had given her early on in our reunion. And then the night we met, I gave her the black and white panda teddy bear that I bought when I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
And she gave it back to me in the package. And that really hurt. And after talking to an adoptee, I emailed her and I said, that's really painful, what you did. And she wrote back, well, I could have, you're lucky I didn't send back your wedding album, because she'd come down to our wedding. And so after that, we started an argument, or kind of a battle over email for a couple of days, and then I just lost it, and I kind of told her off by email, and I said, leave me and my wife alone, I'm done. And a couple of days later, she unblocked me on Facebook and apologized, and then we kind of came to a truce, I guess. But after that, things were never really the same. What happened sending me that package and the bear was really hurtful. And it kind of broke a lot of trust thought I had with her. And then a couple of years later, I was up in Canada. My son's birthday, he turned 25. I went up there, and I ended up staying a bit longer, and I got to meet some paternal family. And so that was a really neat experience. And after meeting them, I came back and I felt another crash, not as big as what I had with my initial reunion, but I still had some processing to do. And when I was there, I didn't contact my birth mother. I just didn't feel the need to, or I didn't want to. And so when our anniversary came up in that October, I messaged her happy 20-year reunion, and she replied back, and she was very critical of me posting on Facebook pictures of my paternal family about my reunion, because she said I used their last name. And then she wrote, you should really think about other people's feelings. And I thought, okay. So I waited about 3 days after she wrote that, and I wrote her back and I said, you know what, I'm 45 years old. I'm not 5, and I don't need your permission about what I post on my Facebook page about my reunion. So I said, I'm done. You just leave me and my wife alone. I'm done with this. I don't need this crap anymore. And after that, I blocked her on Facebook. It had grown for me to the point there wasn't really any positive reason to stay in reunion with her. I could understand she being upset I didn't contact her when I was up there, but that wasn't the purpose of my trip. My purpose was to see my son and hopefully see my brother Aaron and some other relatives, and that's luckily what happened.
It's not uncommon, of course, unfortunately. Do you wish you as a person had approached any of it differently while it was happening? the whole reunion?
Yeah, in hindsight, I wish, yeah, I probably, our first reunion, going up there for 2 weeks and staying with them most of the time was not the healthiest thing to do, because I was going to an environment where I was a disruption to an existing family system, and my brothers didn't know about me, and a lot of her attention was focused on me. And so obviously it would be easy for jealousy from her husband or other people to come up. And that's part of what happened. Um, at times I wish I hadn't responded to her the way I had in some ways, if she sent me an angry letter and stuff. But I also felt I had to defend myself, because a lot of things that she would write were questioning my memory and my character, my conviction, and it was just very disruptive. It was hurtful. And when this would happen the first few times, I would just be, out of whack for 2 or 3 days. I probably was rejected again 6 times in that 20 years at least. And that's very painful. I used to feel like I had to try to fix this. And I got to the point where, no, I don't have to fix this. If I want her in my life, I have that choice. And if it's not positive, then I need to take a step back and, examine, is this really worth continuing?
Yeah.
That's finally what I did back in 2015.
There's a lot of expression of emotion in the chat as you're describing these things, and what the interaction with her ended up like, and her responses to you. So people are feeling very deeply the things that you're conveying here and relating to it on a visceral level. It's powerful. It's sad, definitely, but you're connecting with people who are experiencing or have experienced something similar. And certainly I relate to thinking, I have to fix this. I did that in my own reunion at least twice.
Yeah.
I had to fix my reunion by saying, I'll fix me. That was my response to the people in my reunion, was saying, I messed up and I'll do something about it so I'm acceptable to you. And seeing this now, after the effect coming out of the fog, I think I would have done anything to salvage it, even fully debasing myself, not morally, but falling on every sword imaginable to keep it going at the time.
Yeah.
So I relate to that, to why you would have felt that. And it's amazing you had the strength to overcome that at the end there. I know that isn't the case also for everybody.
Yeah, it is a challenge, because I think a lot of adoptees, we put so much stock and energy into wanting this to work. We have a fantasy of what our birth parents will be like, or birth families, and most of the time things like that don't work out. But our fantasies aren't what reality is. And within the first few months after our reunion, one of her letters, she told me, she said, I'm not the woman you think I am. And looking back, that was kind of probably a warning sign. Because when I was up there, the first reunion, she was very supportive of me and around her family. And then when the reunion after the honeymoon stage was over, I still considered moving back to Canada, being closer to her and my brothers. I was getting along, even with their husband, I was getting along. And she told me later on, she said she didn't want me up there because of the backlash on her. I don't know what she meant by that, but that really surprised and disappointed me. And, you know, I thought I was still holding on to the fantasy, like I'd be welcome into the family and with open arms. And I was to a point, but then if you get too close, it's like, my old roommate told me of I guess people who collect crabs or go crabbing, they put crabs in a pail, and if the one on top tries to get out, the rest of them hold that top crab down because they don't want it to escape. So it's kind of like holding the family system together that was there, and being a disruption to what, you know, their family system was in marriage for 20 some years at that point. Obviously there's going to be ripples to that.
Were you able to maintain any of the relationships with your brothers through her?
My youngest maternal one, we do have contact on Facebook. My paternal family, they didn't know about me, and in 2009, I decided to search out my brothers, and I found 3 of them online on Facebook. And I did contact one and sent him a friend request. And he asked me how we knew each other. So I told him the story about my mom and his dad, or our dad. And he accepted my friend request. And so he and I met a couple years later, and we hit it off great. We only met for 3 hours, and but I felt a really strong connection with my brother, Aaron, someone who thought like me, and we had similar personalities in a lot of ways, similar sense of humor, but it's been a good connection, even though it's been long distance. 12 years after I met him, we still have contact. So
that's great. How about married life, Daryn? How has it been for you in your relationship with your wife to be an adopted person?
It's been good. We've had bumps in the road, but you know, I grew up when I came to Texas. I didn't realize it, but at the age of 23, I found a book on relationships and realized what was wrong with what I had been going through with relationships with women. And I got into recovery, and then that was 1993. And in 2001, I'd been in a relationship on and off, and that finally dissolved. And then I met this woman named Christine on a matchmaker site, and she was moving to Texas. And it's been about 20 years since she moved here. It was a couple of weeks after 9/11. And we met a couple of times and started dating. And within 3 months, we were engaged. And within 3 months later, we were married. And for me to be married for 20 years almost, or over 19 years, and with someone for 20 years, I never thought that would be possible. It's really amazing to me. And I'm very thankful for my wife because she's very supportive.
Good. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Let's talk about being a life coach. Could you talk a little bit about what made you want to move in that direction? A little bit about the things that are most important to you as a life coach to talk to adopted people about?
Yeah. I saw every day when I'm on Facebook on adoptee groups, I see so many people struggle with their reunions and just being adopted in general. And so I felt with my experience being in reunion, it didn't turn out how I wanted, but I learned so much. Just being in reunion and then going to conferences, support groups, and I wanted to help other adoptees with their reunion, with their situation. And it could be from just making the decision to search, and there's a lot of fear to overcome with that during the search, during the reunion, and then post-reunion ongoing. There's so much behind the scenes after the honeymoon stage, after the first meeting. There's so much work that people need help with, and I want to help adoptees with their journeys in reunion, and even just being an adoptee in general.
Yeah, that's great. Very valuable. I'm sure it's rewarding and heartbreaking. It's obviously not something that's surface minimal emotional content. It's pretty significant, the story each person has and what they bring emotionally into this. And psychologically, that has to be a lot to be able to manage with individual people and help them along. So that's a commendable task that you're performing there.
Thank you.
Would you say that there are certain resources or books that have been helpful to you as a life coach and that you would recommend for people?
I think Journey of the Adopted Self by Betty Jean Lifton is just an incredible book. It was the first adoption book I've read. Podcasts like Adoptees On, Who Am I Really, Once Upon a Time in Adoptee Land. There's so many different podcasts that are helpful, just hearing other people's stories,
yeah,
relating, and how others might handle the situation. So when I work with clients, I find out where they're at, what spot they're at, and where they want to get to, and help them find the answers within themselves. Because a lot of our own negative or unconscious thinking gets in the way. And coaching is not the same as therapy, because therapy is more designed to lift people up to a functional level. Coaching is to get them to the next level as far as going on in their life, setting goals, attaining things like that. It's different. They can overlap in some ways, but they're both beneficial to people and adoptees.
Great. And I have a question for you about, so I'm new to social media, I'm new to adoption resources and communities, but I see very few men. I'm wondering, in your experience, we know there's a disparity in terms of the number of adopted men and women, but what are your thoughts on the number of men who are participating in the adoption community?
Mm-hmm.
Or not, you think we just need more people to speak, or are they just not willing to come forward?
That's a good question. Excuse me. I think a lot of it is a lot of society messages that men are supposed to be macho or not show their feelings, not be vulnerable. That's very negative as far as opening up and starting your journey, because I think it's easier for women to do that. Like the Adoption Knowledge Affiliates conference last year, there were about 150 attendees and only 6 men attended virtually. All the rest were women. So there is a huge disparity. I would like to see more men speak about adoption, share their stories, and hopefully we're leaning that way. I remember when I started searching, there were statistics about back then only 15% of adoptees search, and 85% of them were women. So I don't know what the stats are now, but obviously there was a huge disparity in who searched back then, and sadly it does still continue, I think, to an extent.
I was jokingly mentioning to Amanda what I would call an AGS, adopted guy sighting, where I joined some of these new groups and I said, look, there's another guy in there. And it's kind of exciting just to see. And I've had a couple people reach out to me. Oh, you're the other guy who's adopted. And it's kind of funny, but I think you can relate to that, other guys on the call, that there's a certain loneliness to it. But when you talk individually to men, they're very much in tune with it. And they do tend, I think, to express a level of emotional intelligence and connection that maybe is relatable to the women who are in the groups as well. And yeah, we're just here to say we're seeking as well, and wanting to be integrated and whole and participate. So it's been very therapeutic for me to be in the community, even though I've just been surprised at how few men there were participating in it.
Yeah, I agree. The community with the other adoptees is very helpful. Before I started joining online Facebook groups for adoption, I thought the situation with my birth mother and the challenges, I thought I was alone. And I found out that I'm not alone in that situation. And it's comforting to know that you can get help from other people.
Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to tell other adoptees, Daryn, that's important to you for them to know?
I think a lot of us, myself included, have gone through our journey of reunion, and a lot of times we feel hopeless or powerless because we put so much emphasis on the reunion and our value on our connection with our birth parents or birth families. And I know what we go through being separated at birth is traumatic, but those are all circumstances. And a lot of what I think our struggles are with is our own internal thinking about our circumstances. Growing up, we have to adapt, whether we're conscious of it or not. We adapt to our new family and environment. But as we grow older, those adaptations become maladaptive to us. They become a hindrance. So I think what I like doing is with clients and adoptees is to look at what our thoughts are about and our beliefs about our situations. How can we see it differently? It doesn't mean it doesn't matter, but if we can change our thinking about it, we can change our feelings and our actions. I think in a lot of ways we put ourselves through a lot more pain and suffering than we need to. And a lot of it is with our beliefs that we've learned and grown up with.
I think at this point, I would express collectively the appreciation that I've been seeing in the chat for the story and the intensity of emotion that's been generated as you've discussed your own experiences and your vulnerability in sharing with us. I have not seen specific questions in the chat, so I'm hoping that means we covered a lot of good stuff here. I think we did. But if anyone has anything else that they would like to talk about or ask Daryn, then please feel free to either participate in the chat real quick here, or we can certainly follow up after as well. But at this point, I just want to thank you, Daryn, for being so open. And as I said, it's a vulnerability. It's a risk to come out in front of people. You know, this is recorded. You know, there are people, you know, who are not adopted who may be finding out things about you if they were to watch this. And it's just greatly appreciated. You've been willing to do this for us. So we're very appreciated. There is a question here.
Okay.
What do you think was the most beneficial experience from reunion for you?
I think it was answering my questions about where I came from, who my family was, um, meeting people that I look like, who I act like, sound like.
Yeah.
The genetic mirroring, that part.
Yeah. That's very big.
And realizing even if the reunion and some relationships and reunion don't work out, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It doesn't mean it's a failure. Maybe it's they worked out the way they were supposed to in their own way. It may not be how I wanted things to work out with some people, but just to know the answers, where I came from and who I am, who I'm related to, that means so much. And I think it can answer a lot of questions for other adoptees who choose to go on the reunion journey and or have been on the reunion journey. It's challenging to integrate into that family. It's not natural when we're taken away at birth or when we're young. And so we have to look at what our expectations are. And I had to do that with myself as well in reunion.
And then we have another question here.
Okay.
You did mention a book about relationships that was helpful to you. Could you mention that again, the title of that book?
Yeah, it was called Escape from Intimacy by Ann Wilson Schaaf. I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, it was it's from the early 90s. But I saw the book laying on my bed when I was living with my parents. I didn't know how the book got there, but I read the title and I just said, I need that book. And it was kind of like a big insight that I had. And that really helped change my life.
Oh, great. I have one final question for you, Daryn. Do you work at all with birth mothers or adoptive parents?
Yes, I have consulted with a couple of first mothers, and I'm also open to talking with adopted parents as well, because I use the same tools and what I use with adoptees, but a lot of it, a lot of what our struggles are is our own mindset. So I can work with anyone in the adoption constellation that wants to get on a consult and talk about what's going on.
Have they ever come to you together, meaning an adopted person and their, let's say, their adoptive parents? Do you ever?
Not yet.
Okay.
No.
Maybe that's more of a therapeutic question as well, versus a life coach question. But I was just wondering if you'd had any.
I haven't yet, but I could see where the therapy would be beneficial. But I could coach adopted parents separately from the adoptee, and it's all confidential, but usually you have to be able to give something to tell the other party about what's going on and to move forward. So
it looks like we're almost at the top of the hour, so it's been a really fruitful and helpful conversation, Daryn. Again, appreciate your willingness to share. And I think the group would express that as well collectively. So I'll go ahead and stop the recording now.
okay.